1. This story takes place in late 2009. As a young kid, my friend and I would spend all summer exploring the surrounding areas of our small New England town. We would spend all day just exploring anything and everything we could find. One day, my father told us about an abandoned restaurant deep in the woods. My father told us a story that when he was our age in the early 70s, the restaurant was owned by the local mafia, and that group was under investigation at the time for some local people that went missing. The rumor around town was that the mafia had killed the missing people and dumped the bodies in the quarry that was in the back of the restaurant. This was never proven, but it was never disproven. After hearing this story, it made my friend and I want to find this location more than ever. By the time we went looking for the location, it had been long closed and most of the records had been lost to time. The rest of the summer, it was our goal to find this location. Then, on a still September evening, we found the location. At the time, we had such a rush that we had finally found what we had been looking for. We had about 2 hours left of the sun, so we decided to do as much exploring as we could for the day. We started to walk around the outside of the area, which had been almost fully taken by nature. When we finally got to the main building, it was still in decent shape for being unused for 20+ years. After a little while, exploring outside of the building, we found a way in the building through a broken door. We took out our old flip phones and used the screens as a small light. At this point, we had about an hour of sunlight left, and it was soon to be dark. So we walked around the upper part of the restaurant, and all of a sudden, we heard a noise that broke the quiet, still air. I looked at my friend and asked him if he heard that. He nodded his head and mouthed the word yes. At this point, we thought it was just an animal, so we kept exploring. We finally got to the lower part of the restaurant, and as we walked down the steps, we heard another noise much like the first one we heard. At this point, my friend was freaking out and was pulling my arm to head out of the building. Right as I turned my head to look at him, I caught a black object that darted from one side of the hall to the other. At this point, I was freaked out and wanted to get the hell out of that place as fast as I could. We were hauling ass up the steps and running as fast as we can to the broken door. The sun had mostly fell behind the trees as we made it out of the building. I swear we didn't stop running for what felt like miles. And when we felt we had gotten far enough away, we stopped, gasping for breath. We turned and looked at each other, and he had that look in his eyes that said it all. We had no idea if what we saw was real or just made up in our minds. We walked back to my house. By the time we got back, it was about 9 p.m. We talked about what we saw, and we made a plan to head back the next day during the morning and see if we can find out if what we saw was real or not. The next morning, my friend and I made the hour or so walk back to the building. The first thing we did when we got back was to go and look in the area where we had been the night before. We entered the building as quiet as we could. We got to the lower part of the building and looked in the small area. I saw the black figure. We went into the room. I had seen the black mass on the floor. It was a mess of old bedding and nasty-looking shirts and pants, but no person. After seeing this, we got very unnerved and wanted to leave the area. We left the building and decided to try and find the quarry my dad had told us about. It took about 10 minutes to find, but we did. We wanted to walk around the outside of the huge rock face. We got about halfway around the huge circle when we heard what sounded like heavy footsteps no more than 20 feet away from us. Before we could figure out what was happening, a huge, nasty-looking man in his late 40s, with long, light-colored hair, jumped out and tackled my friend. I then started to kick and punch the man, trying to get him off my friend. After what felt like an eternity, the man got up and pulled out a large hunting knife from his pants. In the moment the man was going for the knife, I pulled my friend up and we ran as fast as we could to get away from the old man. We sprinted as fast as we could like the night before, but this time we knew what we saw was real. We got back to my house in about half the time it normally takes. When we got back to my house, we locked the door and fell to the floor in a scared and shocked mood. My friend wanted me to call for my dad and tell him what we just went through. At the time, I was too shocked and scared to do anything. We waited till both my parents got home to tell them what took place today. We told them the story of the night before and what took place today. After telling them the story, we could tell they didn't fully think what we told them was true. My friend and I went to my room and got upset that my parents didn't believe us. We tried to get over it and tried to move on. Later that night, my friend and I were sitting in the living room playing a video game about 11 p.m. At this point, we had started to move on from the events of the day, when all of a sudden we saw the backyard light turn on, and got scared and had a flashback to the events of the day. I built up the nerve to go to the back door and look outside. I noticed that my shed door was cracked open, and I knew for a fact we always kept the door shut. I ran up to my parents' room and shook my dad to get him up to see what was going on outside. Annoyed that I woke him, he soon agreed and walked down and saw what we were talking about and wanted to take a look to see what was outside. He cracked the door and slowly walked to the shed. My dad got about 5 feet away from the shed when an older man ran out and ran into the woods in the back of the house. My dad ran to the house and told me to call the police. I did, and within 5 minutes the cops showed up. I had to tell my story of what took place at the abandoned building in the woods. After telling the cops what took place, they went to go look in the shed and found a large hunting knife on the floor. The police took it and told my parents they would have cops in the area looking for the man. A week passes, and the police had not caught the man or had any new information, so we started to move on again. Fast forward about 8 years later, and my friend and I are now in college. I was calling my mom one day, and she said she had a story she needed to send me. She sent it to me, and it was a story of a local man that had gone missing a week ago while hiking in the woods that surrounded my town. The man was found dead in the same building many years ago I had the encounter with the old man. I'm not saying he had anything to do with it, but it seems like a strong connection. At the time of me writing this, they have never found the person who had killed the man in the building. To the old man in the woods, I hope I never see you again. 2. Just a bit of background about myself. I'm a mid-20s corrections officer from Jersey. I'm a big guy. I'm about 6'2", 280, good amount of muscle, and a good amount of fat. I'm not always the most friendly-looking person. I keep to myself. I don't go out of my way to make conversation with people. However, if you strike up a conversation with me, I'll talk your ear off. Anyway, the point is that I'm used to not being approached by people, and being a potential victim is the last thing I have in my mind. Anyway, let's get into the story. I work the second shift at my correctional facility, and I get out at midnight. It was a nice summer day, so I took my motorcycle into work. I only have about a 15-minute commute, and a nice ride to the end of the day is perfect for me. I chatted with my coworkers in the parking lot for 10 minutes, and we all went on our ways. I hopped on my bike, 19 Road King Special for anyone who cares, and fired it up. The sound of the engine coming to life and the exhaust of the bike roaring always brings a smile to my face. I kicked up the kickstand and accelerated out of the parking lot. There are 2 main ways to get to my house from my work. One is a highway that is a longer trip. The other way is a back road that is a shorter ride, and has some particularly fun curves to navigate, and is usually deserted at night. So obviously I took the back road. This road has absolutely 0 lights. The only light that I had was coming from the headlamp of my bike. This back road is also heavily wooded, aside from the one area that has a mature preserve with a building near it. So aside from that, it was pitch black. I'm enjoying my ride home, as I usually do, ripping through some tight corners and just being obnoxious. The bike is loud as hell, so that's my foolish way of telling myself that a deer won't jump in front of me. I know it's poor reasoning, but oh well. I'm about halfway through the back road when I come to the one stoplight on the route. Of course it turns red as I come to it. I throw my bike in neutral because I'm a wimp who doesn't like to hold in the clutch. In pretty much every other situation, I would just go through this light, but I said fuck it and I waited it out. I really wish I hadn't. Just as a side note, I don't carry my off-duty firearm when I ride my bike. It is uncomfortable to conceal while riding, and open carrying is not a good idea if not in uniform. So, as any biker will tell you, when you're riding, you're completely exposed to whatever is around you. Generally, this means the elements, but in my case, the night was perfect, and the weather was the least of my worries. I've come across many stories in which people avoid tragedy by simply keeping their car doors locked and their windows up. Now that is a luxury I wish I had on this night. So here I am at the freshly red stoplight. The intersection is a simple 4-way, with the road to my right being a small bridge that has a small stream underneath it. Nothing really special, but just as an idea of the environment. My bike had just come to a complete stop, and I just shifted into neutral. I took my hands off the handlebars and just observed the area around me, and took in the nice night and the great weather. Just out of the corner of my eye to the right, I see a pair of headlights coming up the road. I made it out to be a pickup truck approaching the intersection on the road that has the little stream underneath. The truck reaches just before the light when the driver slams the brakes, stopping the truck in the middle of the intersection and conveniently blocking my path. My career in law enforcement, specifically the corrections side, has given me great instincts as far as warning signs to trouble. I mean, this should have been a warning sign for any person, but I immediately put all doubt aside and told myself that I was in danger. The man driving was now illuminated by my headlamp. I can see that he's a mid-40s white male, and he was wearing a trucker cap, and seemed like he had been involved with drugs by just the way his skin and face looked. I could tell that he was also on the smaller side as far as frame goes. Just as I processed all the information, this guy was stepping out of his truck. Now, when I tell you I have never been this scared in my life, I've never been this scared in my life. I've dealt with the worst of the worst for several years at work. I've been in units filled to the brim with dangerous criminals by myself. I've been in cell extractions against inmates the size of fucking Hercules. And I've done all that without a shred of fear. Definitely had nerves while doing those things, but no fear. But in this instance, all I felt was pure, unadulterated fear. My fingers were numb and my body was tingling. I was weak and weightless. I felt that I wouldn't even have enough strength to pull the clutch in. The guy got out of the truck, was looking right at me and saying something. The bike was too loud for me to hear, and I have no idea if this guy was in his right mind, because he made no attempt to yell or say something over the rumble of the bike. He just sort of talked in my direction at a normal tone. I began to back the bike up so I could maneuver around this guy's truck with some room to spare. I knew I didn't want to be close to him as I was going around. I kept my eye on him the entire time I was backing up. At this point I had created enough distance for me to get around, but it was certainly enough distance for this guy to close on foot should he decide to run toward me. Just as I'm ready to get the fuck out of there, I plant my right leg so I could shift into first with my left foot. Well, as I plant my right leg, I stumble and roll my foot on a rock. Nothing crazy, I didn't fall or hurt my ankle. But what I did do was take my eye off this freak for half a second. All I did was look down at my foot, and as I looked up, this crazy fuck was sprinting full speed at me. I only had just enough time to get my left hand off the handlebar to block his swing. He came at me with a full-on JB clothesline from hell. This skinny crackhead packed a punch. I deflected his shot from my stomach into my head. Thankfully, I had a full face helmet, but the hit still jarred me and dragged me backwards. At this point, my feet had lost contact with the ground and my bike tipped over, and I spilled out onto the ground. The road was at a slight incline, so I rolled for a little longer than I thought I would. I wasn't hurt, but the initial fear was gone, and all that was left was anger. From a few yards distance, I could see my brand new Harley was now on the ground, and this son of a bitch was trying to pick it up. I got to my feet and I was in full-on fight mode. This dude was not gonna get my bike. I was 100% ready to go down fighting. In hindsight, that is a foolish line of thought. A bike can be replaced, a life can't. But in the moment I was gonna rescue my bike, no questions asked. I flung open my visor to avoid fogging and ran full speed at this guy. I guess he knew how I felt when he ran at me, because just before I wrapped him up, he screamed pretty loud and pretty awkwardly. It was like a half-scream, half-choke. He was trying to lift the Harley by the handlebars, which is impossible. The bike is just too heavy. This did, however, leave a nice opening for me to wrap his waist up and take him down. On the ground, I postured myself on top of him and began peppering his face with punches. He began to scream again, and I think he asked me to stop. I'm not sure how many times I hit this guy, but he was pretty banged up after. Like I said, I was in total fight mode. Once I let up, he began to whimper, and I could tell that he was scared and pretty much totally regretted his decision. To be perfectly honest, I felt kind of bad for him. I could tell that he was either high or mentally ill, not sure which. I'm a guard, not a doctor. Anyway, he scooted out from under me, and I let him stumble back to his truck. The whole gravity of the situation was just starting to weigh in on me, and my adrenaline was now wearing off. He got in his truck and sped off down the road. I was still shaking from the adrenaline, but I limped over to my bike, not sure why my leg hurt. I'm guessing it was during the takedown, but who knows. I lifted the bike from the ground, swung my leg over the seat. I dropped it into first and ran that red light as fast as I could. I made it home quickly and called the police. I identified myself as a fellow officer and told them I would come down to the station in the morning to make a formal report. They told me my story checked out. The marks on my bike helmet and clothing were enough to validate the story. They never found anything. I'm not sure if they even looked. To be perfectly honest, it was irrelevant to me at this point. I have my bike, the damage was minimal and easily repaired, and I have my life. I'm still working corrections and I still ride my bike to and from work. I'm over what happened. It was just another fight. I've been in plenty of them, and I will be in plenty of them throughout my career, I'm sure. So to that guy that clotheslined me off my bike then tried to steal it, I hope you get the help you need. But in case you don't, and you want another shot at the bike, you'll find me stopped at the stoplight on that back road. Just kidding. I take the highway now, and let's not ever meet again. 3. This story happened back in November 2019. For some background, I'm a 20-year-old female, and I live with my family. I go to a religious meeting twice a week with my family, and we have been going since forever, and have never had any kind of problems before. This new man began attending, and of course he was welcomed. To describe him, he was in his 40s or 50s, and relatively neatly kept. He would stand near the lobby doors and just stare around at people. Quite quickly, I noticed he didn't really talk to anyone, and any conversations he had ended rather fast. As an antisocial person, I never paid too much attention, nor did I ever attempt conversation. I just let him be. 2 weeks into him attending, he came up and began talking to me and my younger sister. We were in the front in the opposite corner, and he made a bit of a beeline from where he was standing at the back to us. I had no idea who he was, and of all days I decided to be conversational. So I had a normal enough conversation with him, and my sister barely said a word. He looked over at her and asked me who was the tallest. I'm the second of 4 children, and with all my pride I said I was the tallest. I remembered he asked an extremely stupid question, something about who the second tallest was. My older sister was married already, so he doesn't know she exists. So, all who was left was my younger sister and my 3-foot-tall brother, so take a wild guess, buddy. Just a shot in the dark. I won't judge you. Then he was quiet for a few seconds, and my awkward self was done with interacting with people for the day, when he piped up and asked me what I did to my sister when she's too shy. We both were kind of confused, and I was like, what? He said, yeah, when she's too shy, do you just shake her? I kind of laughed it off awkwardly, and was like, no. I don't remember the rest of the conversation, but it ended pretty soon after that. Me and my sister were kind of weirded out, and I was mostly confused, as that was one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. I would have brushed it off when a friend of ours who saw him talking to us came over and basically was like, I don't know all the details and I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but just try not to engage with him and keep your younger brother away from him. She knew of him before we did, so we took her advice. At the time, there was nothing to be dramatic about, just don't talk to him. Fine by me. But for the sake of my baby bro who's 5, I mostly wanted to protect him. Later on, my brother was going to the coat room, and that same guy stopped him and tried talking to him. He kept trying to give my brother a high five and was leaning rather close. My brother is super shy, and he's a total boss. So he was trying to get away and was not having any of this. I don't know what came over me, but within 0.2 seconds, I was by my brother's side. I was like, oh, I'd better go put his coat on. And he glared at me and was like, what are you going to do with my little friend? I repeated I was going to put his coat on. He looked at me head to, chest, and said take care. To me, I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, and so I didn't consider it for too long. It was kind of creepy, though. Over the next few times, he made a little attempt to interact with me, so that was it, I figured. However, he would stand at the lobby doors, now equipped with this device. It looked like a giant Bluetooth with a green beeping light, but it was strapped around his head. I figured it was an old-style Bluetooth phone, but I found that less and less people, women mostly, would try to interact with him. I thought it was funny that it was on his head, but what made me uneasy is that he would stare at me almost the entire time. I mean stare, like into my very being. He would have this creepy smile, and then he began to follow me around sometimes, at a safe distance. I was freaked out, and my friends made a bigger deal, though I didn't get why. One night, I had a few of those friends over, and they revealed to me that the device on his head was actually a camera. I was horrified. He was videotaping people in a public place without their consent. Now, many of you might say what we did next was idiotic, but we were just a bunch of silly girls. All we wanted to do was see his Instagram profile and then unfollow him, that's it. He has like 3 profiles, so we were all laughing and wondering what he posts. So my friend made another profile and he accepted. The fake profile we made had a normal selfie of a pretty girl. We scrolled through his profile and his captions were so odd. We were having our fun, but pretty soon he messaged. We all flipped out and decided to see what will happen. Remember, we weren't going to lead him on or anything. He asked questions such as what is our exact location, how old are you? He wouldn't reveal his age and didn't care when she kept saying she was like 30 years younger. Either we said between 19 and 21. He kept trying to video call on Insta, but there was no way in heck we were going to pick up. It was the last straw when he was like, if you were really a good person, you would show yourself. Not like I'm touching you. Yet. It's only a video call. He did not get the concept of trust and consent. Despite us explaining it to him, it simply didn't make a difference to him. That was it for me. Full-fledged proof he was a creep. We deleted the account. My friend Edna said that he has a thing for younger girls and children, and has been looking for a while, which made me shiver. The way he spoke, so robotic and demanding of information, almost made it look like just because he is talking to us, we were automatically supposed to give him what he wanted. So I made sure me, my sister, or my brother were never in a place that we would be alone with him. The creepiness continued. He would be videotaping me while staring at me intensely, still sometimes trying to interact. It became pretty clear that I was his next target. Edna's family is pretty familiar with him, and what he does is essentially creep women to death, ask them out, and he has followed them home before, basically the works. Apparently he was pretty notorious for it. I was getting more scared by the day, and I would dread going. He would follow me, and my heart seized when I saw his eyes. My friends made a joke of it and said it was only a matter of time. I don't blame them for cracking jokes, they didn't know all he was doing, and they did block me sometimes when they caught him staring. Dads would try to distract him, blocking his view of us, but he would ignore them, move, and keep staring at me. With him, he would only talk normally to women and children. To picture it, just imagine a man talking to a wax statue. No emotion, no acknowledgement, nothing. I hated myself for not calling him out, but to put it into context, whenever he did anything, he had that kind of vibe like he was pouring cold water into my veins. All I could do was stand there. It all reached a boiling point when one day he got close enough to me. Before we went, I was internally so scared to see him, and I didn't want to tell my parents. I was remembering a while ago I told someone about the camera and to tell him to take it off. I pointed to where he was literally 2 seconds before and he was not there. I slyly walked about to see if I could spot him, and he was among a bunch of people far off staring directly at me. I was so far away from him. He had his arms crossed and he smiled in a way that he was happy I found him and waved, and I ran back before he could get more of me on tape. So yeah, I didn't want to go. The man talked to him and made him take it off that time. That day he was actually in closer proximity to me than usual, and I was getting a workout constantly moving about to avoid him. Eventually me, my mom, Edna, and her mom were in the coat room, which is a pretty open space on the side of the lobby. He came in as I was shoving my mom out of the coat room so we can leave, because I saw him approaching. And from the corner of my eye, I saw he was rushing. I gave my mom one more little push and she was out the coat room. Then he grabbed my arm and yanked me 6 or 7 feet backwards until we were in the middle of the coat room. Not in an angry way, but like he finally caught me and was reeling me in. I turned to look at him, and his eyes were something I wouldn't mind gouging out. I hated the way he made me feel when he looked at me. I can't even remember what he asked me, but I responded quickly and freed myself, realizing he was still holding on. He had that knowing look the entire time, and I proceeded to take my mom outside because my mama bear was ready to draw blood. Edna's mom was asking me if I was okay, but I had too much on my mind. My dad was in the car, with the rest of my siblings unaware of what happened. I begged my mom to get into our car before he came, and I suddenly became scared he might follow us home, so we left. We almost never get fast food, but I'm so glad my dad took us to McDonald's, and not just for the food. The rest of my family stayed in the car to hear what happened, while I went into McD's with my brother. Not even 10 minutes later, my mom barged into the store and told me to just get out while she gets the food. I was confused. I thought she was mad because I was taking too much time, and I internally was like, pfft, fine, because apparently I can't carry Happy Meals and fries by myself. I turned, and there he was, with his portable camera. He was waving at me while pointing his camera to me. It was mounted on his head, so wherever his head was turned was where the camera was facing. I looked over at my mom and I realized why she came in so fast. He followed us to McDonald's, parked next to us, which is where my mom saw him, and hurried inside. We left as quickly as we could, giving him no time to leave the line and come follow us. I was very shaken. I didn't know what to do. I've had my fair share of heart-dropping, creepy moments, and I always thought that I would know what to do when next time it happened. Those thoughts were for like spontaneous attacks. When it came to public interactions where it was so easy to miss if you were an onlooker, I could do nothing, and I felt so stupid. I was terrified that he would follow us home. We skipped going the next time. Exactly 1 week later, we were later than usual, and when we arrived I saw his car and was like, great, now what am I going to do? But there was no him. It took a few days, but it was eventually revealed that the day we were not there, he was interacting with the kids under 10 in an inappropriate way, looking for excuses to touch them, and hugging them for too long. They were being videotaped, and honestly goodness knows what he needed hours of mundane footage of young women and underage boys and girls for. It was the first time the parents weren't hovering over their children in weeks. It was the very last straw for everyone there, and the day we came late, the Dad Army barred him from coming in, saying that he is perfectly welcome to come in only if he takes the camera off. If he did, they would basically sit on his head until he left. He got aggressive, saying it was not a camera. I had proof from his Instagram that the gadget was a camera, as he took a mirror photo with it, and had no phone or other camera. He threatened violence, and the police were called. I've heard he's out and about, but let's just say he's not coming back anytime soon. I want to stress, however, that I cannot confirm where he is now. Over the next few weeks I heard from random people who were more familiar with him that he definitely had a thing for me, and that his behavior is not unusual, and it was just a matter of time. I'm so glad it's done. I still get the back thought that sometimes he's watching me, but for the most part, I can get back to normal. To finish up this story, I want to put it out there to never judge a victim's actions, whether they cussed them out or not. In an ideal world, showing creeps who's boss is something I would definitely strive and advocate for. But before you ask why they didn't react that way, understand that sometimes you just can't. A lot of people may feel prepared, but when it happens, sometimes the only thing you can do is nothing. Those who react that way know very well that it's not the best way. But be there for them, don't shut them down. It may seem stupid, but people may not react because they are afraid of how people around them will react. People may suggest to not react in any way to make the situation go away, and fear backlash even if they so much as accidentally be where they were. Because, whether we like it or not, people always ask the victim of harassment what they were doing. Although I got a lot of support, one or two were alleging that if I didn't look in his direction, this wouldn't have happened, which is pretty illogical. So to make the world a better place, stand up for the people shackled with fear, and if you can't do something, then support them. And if you're experiencing it, tell the right people, and never think that your normal actions had anything to do with this. People like that need the lamest excuses to strike. Stay safe. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 472. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. This will be Monday, it will. Yeah, I know what day of the week it is. We have an extra day this month, don't we? Yes, it's a leap year. Wonder what I'll do with that extra day. Work, I expect. I'll probably do some work. Well, then again, it's a Saturday, so I'll probably stream if it's a Saturday. Okay, enough rambling and rumbling and farting from me. Well, the farting will come later. Okay, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.